This place has a much different feel than any of the other hiking trails in any other parts of the country I've been to. This is very different. It's peaceful, no doubt, just like everywhere else I've been. But here, you know, that haunted feeling I was talking about when I was walking on the trail of the Coeur d'Alenes up in Idaho, that feeling is way stronger out here. This place feels freaking haunted. I heard something drop like a minute ago. I don't know what the hell it was. It was a heavy, like, pew! I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a bear or what. That sounded mysterious as hell. Definitely was not a squirrel. I was thinking, well, that was, see, I hearing other things drop. I don't know exactly what it is, but they drop to the ground and you hear the crack of leaves and then it echoes all over the place. And I don't know what the hell it is. I don't know if it's just limbs falling off the trees. This place is kind of spooky. You know what I say? I say, let's get the fuck out of here. Fuck. Well, that perfectly depicts my experience hiking in the Smokey Mountains a couple of months ago, when I took a short vacation out to East Tennessee to see what life is like in that part of the South. This was in mid-September, literally 2 weeks before Hurricane Helene came and ravaged that area. After that hurricane came, I thought to myself, wow, if I planned that vacation any later, I would have been stuck down there in East Tennessee for a while. I went down there right before the floods came. But anyway, I explored a lot of those towns in East Tennessee, and I went very deep into the heart of the Smoky Mountains, where the forces of darkness greeted me and gave me a very vivid representation of the path of death. Because that's what that hiking path felt like. It felt like a path of death, like straight up. I felt like I was on a path of death. And now I see what people mean when they say that those forests are haunted, because those forests in the Smoky Mountains really do feel haunted when you try to go hiking in them. I mean, they're extremely different from these forests and mountains out here in Colorado. I mean, I go hiking all the time out here in Colorado, and when I go up into the mountains here, this is a form of stress relief for me. You know, I mean, I go up into these glorious valleys here in western Colorado, And these mountains and forests bring me a sense of peace. They bring me a strong sense of calm. Whereas the mountains in Southern Appalachia gave me a sense of terror and dread. Quite the opposite feeling. But I noticed hiking in them and driving around in them are two completely different experiences. You know, at first I was just driving around in the Smokies on these long and winding roads with these really tall trees on each side and these really thick forests on each side of the road. And I was driving around and I thought to myself, wow, I like this place. I'm digging it. And there are a lot of parking lots on these mountain roads where you could get out and behold these views of the glorious and magnificent Smoky Mountains. And after driving around for a while, I thought to myself, well, I want to try hiking in these mountains. So while I was driving around, eventually I found a parking lot for one of the trailheads, one of the various trailheads, and there were no other cars there. And after I started hiking, I realized why. There were no other cars there. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that those forests have a very dark and sinister atmosphere. They do feel very dark when you go hiking in them. It's a much different experience from just driving around out there. I mean, I beheld some really dark things in that forest. Most notably being that tree that had fallen over. You know, that tree that you see at the beginning of the video that had fallen over and all the roots were yanked out of it and it looked like a giant spider. I truly thought that was a giant spider when I first glanced at it while I was hiking. I was hiking and I was realizing how dark this place felt, you know, and then I saw the fallen tree and I thought, holy shit, is this Mirkwood? Am I in freaking Mirkwood right now? Because that's what those forests feel like. That's the best thing I could compare the Smoky Mountain Forest to, is Mirkwood from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. But despite how dark and sinister the atmosphere was in these mountains, hiking there was totally worth it. Because while hiking there was a dark experience for me, it was also a spiritual experience in many ways. There's something deeply spiritual going on in those mountains, in the Smoky Mountains. I mean, they feel dark, but there's something extremely ancient and spiritual about them. And in many ways, I felt that atmosphere in those forests trying to speak to me, trying to speak to the innermost depths of my soul. And I've heard other people say this too, that these mountains, they will do that. They will start to really speak to you when you go hiking in them. And of course, you know, some people, there are a few people out there who are crazy enough to go hiking out there and they feel fine. Or maybe they're not crazy enough. Maybe they're wired extremely differently from someone like myself, someone who loves going out into forests where the energy is always positive. Because out here in Colorado, these mountains and these forests, they always give off a very positive energy. They don't feel haunted whatsoever. I'm sitting out here on a dark day too. It's a pretty dark day. The sun's not out. Usually it's always sunny here in Colorado. But right now it's not sunny and it's towards the end of the day and there's no darkness here. I don't feel nothing. There's no darkness out here. It doesn't feel dark out here. It's cold out here, but it still doesn't feel dark out here. Anyway, back to my point. There's something deeply spiritual going on in the Smoky Mountains and in the Appalachian Mountains as a whole. All right, so my camera battery died, so I had to go and get my other camera battery. Canon M50s. These batteries way too much. But anyway, after I had hiked on that trail for only 30 minutes, for the rest of that day, it was a little difficult to shake off that feeling of darkness that I got. I mean, those forests did strike me with some fear. But that night, I started to witness myself in that state of fear, though. That night, I entered into a very long period of deep introspection. I started to really think all of these deep thoughts, all sorts of deep thoughts relating to fear and relating to consciousness in general. When it comes to fear, what I had realized that night is that fear is an illusion. This was a very stunning realization. This is something that a lot of those Hindu mystics and those Tibetan monks, they know this to be true. And I had an experience that led me to realizing that this is true, that fear is an illusion. I started really thinking deeply about fear and the fear that I was feeling that night. And I realized that feeling of darkness that it was difficult for me to shake off, I didn't need to be feeling that way because nothing bad happened that day. When I went hiking there, I wasn't attacked by some wild animal in the forest. I wasn't attacked by some dark spirit that may exist in those forests. I wasn't killed by some, whatever they call them. What are those creatures that they call, that lurk in Appalachia? You know, the skinwalkers. I wasn't attacked by no skinwalkers that day. Nothing bad happened when I went hiking. It's just that dark, sinister atmosphere that was in the air in those forests was just creeping me out so much and striking me with a sense of fear. But there was no reason to feel that fear. I realized why I felt fear and why those forests look and feel so dark. When every single one of those mountains is completely covered in these really tall trees. I mean, those really tall trees and those really thick forests on the Appalachian Mountains, I mean, they form this canopy, this layer underneath the trees. And if you hike up one of those mountains, you're underneath this endless canopy of trees. And underneath that canopy of trees, there's not much sunlight that goes through underneath that into that layer. Not much sunlight. It's almost always dark. And I was hiking on a sunny day. Even then, on a sunny day, it was still pretty dark under there. I thought to myself, well, if a place doesn't get much sunlight ever, then it's going to take the form of a place that looks and feels very dark. And you know, the trees will start to grow a certain way and they'll start to give off this sort of aura that makes the place feel haunted. It makes the place feel, you know, spooky, like you're in a horror movie, you know? And so I don't think those forests in Appalachia are actually haunted. I think they just give off the impression that they're haunted. And if a place is only giving off the impression that it's haunted, but it's not actually haunted, then any fear that you feel from that place is an illusion. It's the fear is not actually real. But yeah, the fear I was feeling was an illusion. But then I started thinking about other fears that I have. And then I realized the same principle applies to all other fears that I have. Because how much of that fear that you feel, whatever your fear is, whatever your fears are, how much of that fear actually exists out here in the external reality outside of your mind? None. It's just a bunch of thoughts and feelings in your head based on what you're perceiving out here. Your fears are not real. They're illusions. Just a bunch of thoughts in your head, a bunch of feelings in here, but they don't actually exist out here. There exists 4 states of consciousness, and fear corresponds to your lowest state of consciousness. And it has been said by the highly spiritual people of the world, the more negative emotions that you feel are illusory. They correspond well with the whole idea of illusions. Negativity itself is more illusory. It's not actually as real as positive energy and positive emotions, the positivity in this existence. And I found this to be the case with fear when it comes to my experience in the Smokey Mountains. And I realized the reason why I was stricken with fear after hiking there was because throughout most of my 20s, I felt pretty depressed. And this is not something that's unique to me. A lot of us young guys go through our most depressing years when we're in our 20s. When you're in your 20s, you're a young man, you're 22 years old, you're 24 years old, your life don't look good. Your life is a big mess. And mine certainly was. I mean, it still is kind of a big mess right now, but I've done certain things within the past year to improve myself and improve my life, you know. But even then, there have been certain months this year where I have felt that depression and those negative emotions that I've felt in years before. There were years where I felt much emptier. I felt empty inside and incomplete. And in the couple of months before I went out to Appalachia, I felt those feelings much stronger. Because towards the beginning of this year, I felt pretty good. I was doing the Wim Hof method very consistently, and I was going to the gym, doing all these Hindu pranayama breathing exercises that I had learned last year. And that has been helping a lot. Been practicing semen retention and all these other great things. But I was hit with those depressing feelings like a couple months before I went to Appalachia again. You know, the depression, it comes in waves. For me, it comes in waves. And yeah, I mean, being depressed, that corresponds to your lowest state of consciousness as well. Depression, that feeling of emptiness, that feeling of incompleteness, and fear. This is all part of that low state of consciousness. The emptier you feel, the more depressed you feel, the more susceptible you are to feeling fear. Because if you're depressed, if you feel incomplete, that means you don't feel as alive, right? You don't feel as alive as you could be. And if you don't feel alive, that means you feel closer to death, right? You don't feel alive, you feel closer to death. And fear of death is the ultimate fear. Now, all other fears you have stem from the fear of death. And during that night when I felt a lot of fear, and I started thinking so deeply about fear, I realized the key here is to do things to help me feel more alive, to get out of this really low state of consciousness. Those forests, they're kind of testing me in a way. So I started practicing all the deep breathing exercises I had learned, you know, the Wim Hof and the Nadi Shana, I can't pronounce Indian words, alternate nostril breathing, and certain yogic Kriya yoga breathing techniques, and everything else that I had learned. You know, I went to a gym in Johnson City. When I was staying in Johnson City, I went to this really nice gym there, much better than the gyms here in Colorado. It was a very nice gym, and was working out and meditating. I went into this historic park and was meditating for a while underneath a tree. I was doing the semen retention the whole time when I was in Tennessee. I was talking to the friendly woman at Best Buy. All these are things that help you feel more alive. They pull you out of that really low state of consciousness where you feel emotions like fear and depression and negativity. And by the end of that vacation, I felt so alive again. That's why I'm saying that there's something deeply spiritual about those forests. They can teach you a lot. But I noticed that in Southern Appalachia, it's probably different in Northern Appalachia, but in Southern Appalachia, they tend to show you the dark aspects of yourself, or they tend to mirror the dark parts of yourself. It's like a dark psychedelic trip in a way. I mean, it's not a very pleasant experience, but those forests will show you the dark parts of yourself so that you can work on yourself in that way. One thing I will note here is how old those mountains are, how ancient they are, like I mentioned earlier on. Those mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, is one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world. In fact, it might be the oldest mountain range in the world. They're much older than these mountains out here in the Rocky Mountains. I mean, the Rocky Mountains can be compared to a young teenage kid who has lots of energy, lots of style, lots of testosterone, you know, and he's cool, you know. He's cool to be around, and he's got a lot of positive energy in him. He's got a lot of drive and vigor. Yeah, the Rocky Mountains is like a young teenage kid, whereas the Appalachian Mountains are more like an extremely, extremely old man in his 80s or 90s. And he's seen this world for so long. He's seen this world evolve for so many millions of years. He has seen the rise and fall and the rise and fall and the rise and fall of this world so many times. He has seen certain species of living creatures rise up in nature and dominate the world. Species of living creatures that were never meant to go extinct, and yet he's lived long enough to see them go extinct. He's extremely old. Those mountains are extremely old, and because they're extremely old, they have so much wisdom. There is an energy of extreme wisdom, deep wisdom in those mountains. And if you go into those mountains and you go hiking in them, and those mountains look at you, they can look into the deepest parts of your soul. And they will, and if there's darkness in your soul, they will mirror that darkness. They will start to mirror the dark parts of yourself so that you're forced to look at them, because if you don't look at them, if you just keep them in the back of your mind for the rest of your life, you're not going to evolve. And these mountains, like I said, they have seen so many different species of living things, living creatures evolve over the course of millions of years. They can help you evolve. But if there's darkness in yourself, if you feel depressed, if you feel negative, if you're a bad person, they will force you to look at how bad you are, or they will force you to acknowledge how depressed you are. They will force you to acknowledge your fears, to confront your fears, and to confront the negative parts of yourself so that you can evolve, so you can work on those negative parts of yourself, become aware of them, and you grow as a human being. That's what I got from the Appalachian Mountains. It's very deep. It was a very deep experience. It was a dark experience. I'm pretty sure most people who go into those mountains, they try to go hiking in them, they will get a dark experience instead of a nice experience. Because every person has a dark side, and it seems that the Appalachian Mountains show you your dark side so that you can work on it and raise your consciousness. There are so many other aspects to what happened here. There's so many other things that happened in regards to that hiking trail in Appalachia. I mean, I'm going to be making quite a few videos about these experiences and how they tie into other areas of my life. I mean, this is just one thing I'm talking about, but there are a couple other topics that relate to my experience here. And also, I noticed that when I went into those mountains, they were trying to mirror who I was. For the past few years, since I've gone through these periods of depression, I mean, there are certain family members and certain friends that I have and that I've had, and they would think very highly of me. They'd say positive things about me. They look at me in a positive light. But a lot of them, for the past few years, wouldn't want to hang out with me or spend time with me because I was depressed, you know. And so they would think highly of me, and they love me from afar. You know, I love you, Jimmy, but they don't want to get up close. They don't want to get up close and hang out or spend time with me because I didn't feel so good. And you see, this is the same thing I'm saying about the Smoky Mountains. Because in the Smoky Mountains, I was saying towards the beginning of the video that they look awesome from afar. They look really cool. But if you get up close and personal with them, you go hiking with them, it is pretty dark. And see, they're trying to mirror me because that's been my life for the past few years. But anyway, it's getting dark right now here. Still don't feel haunted. It's also getting kind of cold, but it's still not haunted here. That wraps up this video on my exploration into the deepest parts of the Smoky Mountains and the Smoky Mountains exploration into the deepest parts of me. It was a very interesting experience, very dark experience, but it was also an experience that was well worth it. I am very grateful I went out there. Anyway, thank you for watching. Till next time, much peace and namaste. It's getting freaking dark and cold out here, man. Ugh.